All right, so my name is Andrea. I'm the chair of the Burlington Development Review Board, and I'm moving to call today, July 1st, July 1st, 2025 meeting to order. We have 2 items on our agenda, and we'll take them in order. The first is 120 Depot Street, a request for a variance approval for the front yard setback. And I see the applicants here. Let's take them on, come on up. And all those who would like to speak on this application, could you raise your right hand? That'd be you. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give, the matter under consideration is true and correct with the pains and penalties?
I do.
All right, so. Anyone else online? Okay, so. This is a request for a variance for a front yard setback on a parcel we've seen several times now. And we last granted a variance in 2021 for the front yard setback, but that expired, right? So are you essentially, I was supposed to take that LR. Are you asking for the identical variance?
Yes.
Got it. Any changes to the site since we approved the last variance?
No.
Members of the board have questions? The staff notes reflect that there's no finding possible on the issue of whether a 25-yard setback would require substantial incursion into the steep slope. So I want to follow up with Scott, this is yours.
Yeah, 25 foot.
And so the setback for the last variance was 75 feet.
Under the prior standards, the front yard setback was 70 feet, which was a slant up variance.
Right.
So with the multiple incremental changes to the residential district standards we've seen over the past year or so, there's a new 25-foot limit. How far back? That's a new twist.
Right. And the 25-foot setback is a new setback. Do you remember, Steve? When we approved the last variance, we give you a set number of how far you had to be set back.
10 feet.
We approved a 10-foot setback, which would still be less than the 25. And is that the same number you're seeking now?
Yes.
Can you briefly explain why 25 feet would, I know 78 is obvious, it's like way into the
Right. Yeah. Even
walk us through 25.
right. Even with the 25 versus the totally infeasible 78, the slope is so close to the front of the lot and so steep that you would end up having to essentially excavate the whole house back into the slope. That's part of what some of our other issues that are the other variants that we more or less have on continuance, I guess is how you would call it, that I was in for 4 years ago.
Well, something else you were asking for. This one I
Sure, with the height.
The height, it was essentially based on getting a relief from the 50-foot requirement to a 10-foot requirement. But they are 2 separate issues. But the whole impetus for either of them is that in order to build something that isn't mostly below ground variance,
You need to move it closer. So you're asking for variance to 10 feet.
Yes.
Any other members of the board speak on this? Nobody else was raised their hand to speak on this, so. I will. It's a public hearing. We'll deliberate on this.
So,
You're done now.
just for the moment.
Yep. All right. The next item on our agenda is 216 Leddy Park Road. Applicant, City of Burlington and Max Madalinsky. The applicant here?
Might be online.
Yeah, they're online. I was just pulling up the project plans. Here we have Max and Dana as applicants.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm actually going to hand it off to Dana Allen, our consultant who has been working on the design, to sort of give you an overview of the project.
Okay.
Hey Max, thanks. Scott, would it be easier if can I share my screen? Is that a possibility?
Sure.
It might be easier
Yeah.
that way.
Yep,
Sorry.
I'll stop sharing, then you can.
Okay, thanks. I think I have privileges. Yep, great, perfect, I do. Okay, is that screen visible for everyone? Should just be the existing conditions plan.
Wait, I'm sorry, Dana, I forgot to swear you and Max in. I apologize.
Okay, no worries.
Will you raise your right hand? And does anybody else want to speak on this application? Or
I
may want to speak on this?
think Knight was supposed to join us as well. I don't know if I can see him in the chat or in the participants, but he may speak if you want to ask him questions.
I see a 9. So.
Knight-eyed, yeah.
Anybody who wants to speak on this application, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter of consideration is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury? Say yes. All right, thanks. Go ahead, Dana. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for having us tonight. Yeah, so this is a proposal for a bike park at Leddy Park, primarily consisting of dirt jumps, to be constructed, sort of as shown here. I can zoom in a little bit if that's not clear. Sorry about the squares. Sometimes the PDFs glitch. But yeah, to be constructed along, I guess, what is essentially the exit road. Let's see. On this side of the park, so the northern edge of the park there. Adaptive mountain bike friendly. So parts of the trail will be 6 feet wide, approximately, earthen trail. Parts of the trail will be up to 12 feet wide. And so this upper section, we have a flow trail. The lower section, we have a jump trail. The jump trail will be a little wider just to accommodate the dimensions of the jumps. We're going to have a return trail, that's to say a climbing trail, again, about 6 feet wide, coming up, sort of at this edge of the park. So that'll have, one-way traffic. Essentially, all these trails are one-way traffic. Of note, the existing pedestrian trail that runs along sort of through the center of the park, we're proposing an entrance off that. We're also proposing an entrance off the bike path down here to get onto this return trail, so not onto the jump trail, flow trail, so no user conflict there. There's an existing sort of informal footpath that runs from this neighborhood over to the maintenance yard. That'll be sunset, at least in this section as part of this, just to avoid user conflict. Other things of note, and again, I'm happy to answer questions during any of this, but there is a wetland down here, so you can see this little mapped wetland. On the lake side of the bike path with its 50-foot buffer, we are outside of that buffer. What else? Material staging, we'll be staging material in this area using some stockpiled soils on site for construction. I am gonna move to this next page just to illustrate something. We are proposing borrow pits throughout the site, so those are shown here with their approximate diameters from center. These are relatively shallow borrow pits to mine for native soils to construct the jumps, 2 to 4 feet in depth, depending on the size of the pit. We've located those. We did a review of the existing conditions, from the 1942 rendering plant study. We are working outside of any of those areas that were noted on those georeference maps as potentially impacted. And so we're planning on looking at all of these borrow pits, prior to really getting in there and excavating to make sure that the soils that we're seeing in these pits are native. We're not proposing removing any more than 4 trees above 9 inches diameter breast height. So a minimal amount of clearing as far as larger trees go. These trail corridors will have understory cleared, so shrubs and things like that will be cleared for the trail to be constructed. And we're sort of showing those limits of disturbance. These green lines, that's the trail width itself. It's 6 feet. Again, this jump trail is 12 feet wide. Again, to accommodate the geometry of the jumps and their side slopes. Return trail at 6 feet. And then the black lines show the limits of disturbance. So essentially where you can expect vegetation clearing on either side of the trail, as well as to allow for a limited harvest of soil to build up the tread of that trail. Let's see, we covered we covered staging. We've been in touch with Burlington about stormwater permits. We're using simple vegetative disconnection for all of this. Soils are really good on site for infiltration. We're really creating very little connected impervious surface. So most of the stormwater runoff will be managed very close to where it's generated, within 10 or 15 feet, generally speaking. I'm going to pause there for questions or any comments.
The informal pedestrian path that's going through there, what mechanisms are gonna be put in place to prevent it from just being reestablished?
That's a good question. I think what we're going to try to do is use like larger woody debris, especially at the interface of that trail. And where these jump trails are going down, we're not talking about gates and things like that. So, I think if there's an option to use stones, larger stones, if we have some of that on site, I think Knight could speak to that if he's online. I don't see him at the moment, but yeah, so not gates, but things like, larger trees, the dead trees that we might be able to harvest out of the woods, stones, and then duffing the path over to essentially hide it, from its existing condition.
And do you have any concerns about that just causing, because it seems like it's a desire path effectively, it sounds like. And so do you have any concerns about, people moving just slightly east or slightly west and just kind of regenerating that conflict in a different place, just trying to get over to Leddy?
Yeah, I'm not certain. I think there's always some amount of informal usage that occurs in these areas, and so I'm not sure what the pressure is, frankly, on that. But we will have, this existing path here, and I don't think we're planning on doing anything with this existing section of the informal path. So people will be able to come out of this neighborhood and then gain access to this formal footpath, bike path, to then get onto the bike path or to go up into the park itself. So hopefully that scratches the itch, as it were, along with, some discouragement in the form of naturalized barriers. But I don't know if people are gonna cut across as they have been. That'll sort of remain to be seen.
You mentioned the number of trees above 9-inch caliber that were being removed, but do you have an accounting of the total number of trees that you plan on removing?
We do not. We didn't inventory anything under 9 inches DBH. Of note too is with respect to these borrow pits, the borrow pit locations were chosen to avoid cutting trees other than sort of the smaller saplings. So these are sort of areas of natural understory opening where we can avoid larger roots. In one of them, we are proposing cutting a 9-inch beech, but beyond that, nothing. So there was care taken to sort of like essentially maintain canopy as much as possible.
I'd also like to jump in and give some other background to how we sited the bike park in this part of the woods at Leddy. Through the Leddy Park Comprehensive Plan, where we sort of surveyed the entire park and spoke with the community about things they wanted to see in and do in Leddy and other improvements they might want to see there. We had an ecological consultant survey the woods and the understory and do some historical digging into the site as well, just looking at what the various age metrics were for different parts of the canopy, where was the understory most intact with the most native species. And this area on the southern edge of the park was identified as having the most invasive species of everywhere in the park. The youngest overall canopy due to past clearing. Like if you were to look at a 1930s aerial of this site, what you would see is an open field here. So there was a lot of ecological study that went into determining where we could put this amenity in the park that would have the least ecological impact.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that background, Max.
I don't want to cut off your presentation, Dana, but I think so I feel that we have a pretty good understanding of the project. I'd be curious if any members of the public have any comments or questions. Anybody from the public want to comment on this? Got questions, concerns? Want to speak on it?
So.
Would you ask come up?
Sure,
Come
absolutely.
on up.
Thanks for having me. My name is Sean Mullen, North Main Street, Burlington. I'm a member of the Burlington Bike Park Coalition, which kind of speaks for itself as to what it is. We've been working since 2017, raising money, gauging public, input and interest in this project, of which there is a great amount of it. We did a couple of surveys and arrived at this park with the help of Parks and Rec. And really believe this site to be really great, and the project really great as a community space, a free community space. We've done things like taken over the green up day at Leddy Park, really trying to understand the community around the park and sort of using a few guides like that. This is really concentrated on families in the area. They have a great interest in having somewhere to go with their kids, where they can use that, and it's where it's kind of a safe, nice built area. There's some other informal bike parks or jumps and things around the area, and we're trying to discourage that because that kind of gets built and disrupts, a lot of like walking paths and things like that. So we really felt there was a lot of pressure to help alleviate that, and just feel like it's going to be a great community space, and we hope to be very good neighbors in the future. We did start this as almost like a pilot project, where it's a little smaller than what we all wanted, so that we can kind of gauge what works and what doesn't, so that we can make adjustments going forward to accommodate the neighbors in the area and also the greater community. So, thank you. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Represent Church 146 Lakewood.
Okay.
So first question, is there going to be any illumination on this project?
We will let the applicant respond. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Direct to that.
Ask the question, we'll direct that. Good question. I don't see any, but we'll let him confirm.
No, there will not be any illumination in the park. or for this amenity in the park. There are lights by the tennis courts, obviously.
Oh, yes, no, but just added illumination, I'm sorry, if I wasn't clear.
No,
For the second, thank you very much for that. Second question I had, which prompted, based on your access to the park via Beachcrest Drive from Lake Otter, Lakewood Estates area, which was the direct path that would go on to the hockey arena at one particular point in time. Looking at your diagram and making sure I'm understanding the mapping correctly. This would be coming off of Beachcrest, would be traveling northbound towards the hockey arena. There used to be a service road that serviced the hockey arena. Is that road being impacted by this project? So that would come out of the south part of for clarity, would have come out of the south part of the hockey arena parking lot and loop to the south and then headed down around across the bike path into the back of the hockey arena. It got decommissioned a while ago, but I know the road itself is more or less just been left abandoned. Is that part impacted by your project? Just out of curiosity.
I'm not familiar with that road. What we're showing here is what we're impacting. You know, so essentially off the end of the road here. Again, that informal path to essentially the waste storage site. That's the only thing that we're proposing to sunset in any way.
you are talking about that sort of like road path that goes just when you cross, if you're on the bike path, and you go just past those houses and you get into Leddy Park. On your left, there's like a clear flat area that winds its way through the park and eventually brings you down to the backside of Leddy Arena.
Yes, it can, yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is when we originally came off that Beachcrest path. It would intersect with that service road that they had kind of decommed it. So my question to them, would it make sense, because you were concerned about traffic, to encourage direction that would bring folks down to the bike path, or as you mentioned, taking the natural path where they could walk up to the east without impeding your bike. That's what maybe I'm, granted, it's been a hot minute since I've been down in that area.
We have some limitations on what we can do with municipal projects, but it doesn't look like there's any changes.
All right, well, that was really the only two questions I had. I didn't want to take any more time.
No, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
There, Jeremy Oakley's, Gosport, been a resident of the New North End for about 15 years, and I'm a mountain biker longer than that. I have 2 kids at CP Smith, who are getting into mountain biking, and I'm excited to be able to introduce them to the sport and allow them to learn without having to drive 15 minutes to an hour outside of town. And personally, I would like to enjoy this park as well. I think it'd be a great addition to the community, and that's all.
All right, appreciate it, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, go for it.
Can I speak on this? I'm a resident of Burlington, I'm gonna pay taxes on property in Burlington.
I'll let you speak. Kathy.
Sure, I just wanna let you know there is interest outside of Burlington. I have 3 daughters that are non-bikers and come to visit this park, we travel, as many non-bikers do, hours to things like this, so.
I know you, yep, okay, great. You're allowed to visit Burlington. We'll let you know. Yeah.
Hi, Sarah Carpenter. I live at 200 Lakewood, which is kind of about halfway, 3 houses in from Beachcrest, and I'm also happen to be the city councilor for the Ward 4 area. And I am supportive of this project. I guess I'm just a little concerned when I heard you talking about some clearing of the underbrush. There's actually a lot of underbrush there, which is sort of junk. I get it, but it really does screen that set of about 10 houses. So I think the question was asked, how much are you taking out? And I guess my caution is, even if it's a junk tree, it has a role in screening that set of homes. And the other question I had is, are you gonna add any trees to or I guess I'd say to the applicant max, are you adding trees?
Yes, actually, something that came out of our conservation board meeting was a request to have us add in native species after the project is completed. So we're going to be working with our conservation team to draft up a plan, sort of outlining what we're going to replant. Some of it is we want to see exactly like which areas have the biggest part of disturbance, because while we're looking at this swath, we think some areas are going to be tighter than what's shown on the plan currently. So we're kind of waiting to see what it looks like in the field, and then we're going to be working on getting some native conservation species to kind of put back in place. There's also some good striped maples and other understory plants that we've talked about potentially digging out on the front end once Knight has everything, like the limits kind of flagged out a little bit more in the field, to kind of get those, set them aside, and then replant them after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just gonna chime in on the screening front distances here. Some of basically the closest we get in terms of this trail to any of the houses is about 150 to 175 feet. And then it goes up from there. So there's quite a bit of existing vegetation in between.
And the limits of the clearing, Dana, are generally just the trails areas.
Yeah, that's correct. Again, just the tread plus what we need on either side to sort of ensure sight lines, as well as to provide like super local borrow for soils and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
The informal walking path is very highly used, and I watch people every day, particularly in the winter. So there is quite a bit of sightline, even though you're still 150 feet from those homes. So again, keeping as much vegetation as you can, even while this is not part of the project, but I'm addressing this to the Parks Department, thinking about the vegetation south of that line there and making sure that it remains solid and a good screen for the neighborhood, I think will be important. Particularly if people are trying to enter the park from that informal path. The other question I had about the maintenance of the path, which is really not maintained at all by the park department, but a concern again for the project, which is if people will begin using it as a bike path. Right now, it's pretty much a walking path. I would say that the neighborhood, which has 112 homes, walks to Hannaford's a lot on that path. And so just an observation for the park department to make sure that we don't get a lot of bike traffic.
Can I just ask, are you talking specifically about the formal path that goes east, or are you talking about the impact? Right out of that.
That goes north, so.
There's an east-west path. I don't want to call it formal. It's that black dotted line there. Yeah, great. Yeah. The north-south one that you're talking about sunsetting also gets a lot of use. I appreciate why you would sunset it, because it walks right across the bike path. I personally think you're gonna have a little struggle with that. It's not a path I happen to use, but I think the kids that go to Leddy a lot go the straight distance, so you may wanna, they certainly can go north, west, and north to get there, but that won't be the straightest line. Some of the kids I know in the hood that are most excited by the path, or by the bike jump part of it, are probably gonna be more inclined to go straight through, so I would say that's caution to look at that.
Yeah,
guess-
thank you.
Would they first run into the return trail if they did go over the up trail?
I would
No,
think so.
that's if you're coming from the neighborhood, the first trail you encounter is the jump line.
Okay,
They can also just look left and right. Plus, if they feel so inclined.
sure, when you're 10 and 12, you do that all the time.
These aren't cars.
Yeah, no.
They do it as like ski mountains.
Yeah. Observing that for the project itself, it's, I just think it's something you'll have to, because it's a very well used path. That's just important to remember. And again, I guess my main comments, and I am supportive of the project, is anything you continue to do with the screening, even a little bit south of the actual jump line itself for the neighbors that live on Lakewood Parkway.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Knight. I'm the builder on the project, and I think, that's a great point. And some of this revegetation that the Conservation Board has recommended should certainly be concentrated in that area, because that informal path that we're shutting down is actually an old road through there. And I think there's a sewer line, a city sewer line buried under there as well. So, just sort of closing that off using, we've worked on many projects like this in the past where we have to close down existing trails. And you're right, it's difficult, but we do have strategies for that I think, I know there's several large logs already over in this staging area that we plan to bring over and place right across that. So that'll help. There's some rocks over there too that we can use. And so, we're certainly going to try our best to do that.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right. Feel like I've heard everybody who wants to speak on this. Sir, you're up.
We have some folks online as well. AJ.
Okay.
I'm Ron McGarvey. I live at 162 Lakewood Parkway. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure.
I understand that the access to the park from the bike path is probably going to be very evident signage. People will see it. They'll know what it is and what to do, I guess.
Yeah, we're working on a sign plan, with the Parks and Rec department. So we've noted where those signs will ultimately go, but that's not part of this project at this time. So that's gonna be something that, the city drives, but we have locations essentially planned for those, but those will be added later.
Okay, I guess my concern is the access at the other end of the park, which is the east end, I guess, where it intersects with that informal walking path. And I just wonder if there's any consideration to turning that 180 degrees so it goes out into Leddy Road or the area right below the tennis courts. Because I see people accessing that entrance are going to be coming down the informal bike path. And as Sarah noted, we could become a bike path there, where it's right now, it's basically pedestrian. So any thought to why that location for the access?
I can speak to that a little bit. Ron, the idea of 180ing it and having it exit into a road with cars on it, I frankly would have a lot of more concern about. As much as there can be conflict between walkers and bikes, I think it would be much more dangerous to have the possibility that a kid could ride a bike out of the woods into the Leddy Park exit road. We have heard from a number of you that people drive way too fast on this road, and we know that is a known thing and a concern that we also share. So I would be very concerned to suddenly daylight a bike trail into a road that has vehicle traffic on it. We are starting small in this way because we want to kind of see how this plays out with the existing traffic on this road. We sort of expect that this eastern entrance is going to end up being kind of the secondary entrance, and that you won't see as much traffic on the existing trail from bicycles, that it'll just be a lot more desirable to kind of come up the bike path and then cut into that main entrance right there. But it is something I can't say we have a 100% like all of the data we would want to have to be able to tell you exactly what we're going to see on the existing trail after this gets built. It's kind of something we're hoping to start small with this, see how that plays out a little bit. And then if we need to make adjustments about how people get in and out, if we're seeing traffic conflicts on there, to kind of fix it as it moves along. And before doing expansion on future phases of the bike park.
I understand the possible conflict with automobiles, but also there's a possibility of conflicts with pedestrians on that path. Will there be any signage at the terminus of the informal bike path to say, here's the bike park, here's how you get to it?
That's what application just said, the signage is not part of this application.
They will propose signage. That will be proposed separately. Because they haven't finished it yet.
Yes, correct, yep.
Is there any possibility that there would be no signage at that end anyway? That would be a request.
Okay.
Thank you.
noted.
Sure. Name's Tony, Burlington resident of South Newski Avenue, and just here to speak in favor of the project. I think it's a great start, and it's going to be awesome for kids, families. I wish I had something like this growing up. Would have kept me from raising hell in the street. Yeah, I think it's going to be great for the whole city, the whole neighborhood. No concerns, and I look forward to helping make it a reality. So thanks.
People online.
We have Renee Lauber, hand up. Renee?
Okay. Renee, you're up.
Hi, thanks very much. I don't know how to turn my camera on. I'm not seeing that as an option, so I'll stay off camera here, but
You're just fine.
okay, great. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm here to speak in strong support of this project. I am I guess you would call me a former avid mountain biker myself who doesn't have time to get out to Essex or Richmond or elsewhere to go riding. So I am guilty, as the first speaker mentioned, of riding through Star Farm Park and other places where we really shouldn't be riding as much as we do, in just to get that fill. I have two young girls who I'm also super excited. They're avid mountain bikers, and they can't wait for this to be built. And as I think of the opportunities for the community as a whole, it's such a wonderful way to expose a much larger audience of kids who probably have never mountain biked. I can think of all the camp opportunities and whatnot that the city could offer as a way to introduce more kiddos to this awesome sport that gets them outside, moving their bodies, doing risky things, and frankly, having a blast. So 2 thumbs up, please. This is such an asset and really leans into a growing recreational industry in our state, becomes, another draw for Burlington. So 2 thumbs up there. And I just a note to some of the concerns. I appreciate that all of the speakers who have come with some concerns today have brought them in a really constructive way. I empathize with this. I've been through this myself with my own house and a development that went in next to us. And I understand, change is hard when you're talking about your home and your biggest asset. I would just add that, to the last conversation about turning that exit on the east end of the park, riding your bike down Leddy Avenue or whatever it is called, the road that goes to Leddy Park, is like treacherous at best, especially with kids. It is hardly narrow enough for 2 cars, never mind 2 cars plus bikes. And I ride those foot trails on the north and south end of the park all the time. And while I do periodically see pedestrians, I ride them multiple times a week, those trails. It's maybe once every 4th or 5th time that I ride those trails that I see a pedestrian. And I'm not arguing that pedestrians do use those trails. I can see how it's an important trail, but I think, it's not a constant flow of pedestrians, and it feels like something that, it sounds like the park designers are motivated to watch and learn and solve if necessary, but it feels like that's something that can probably be solved for. But anyway, strong support. Thank you for all the work that went into this. We're really excited to see this come to life.
All right, I know someone else was online. Thank you, Renee.
And Adam Morse. That was right after that. Adam, you're up.
Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. My name is Adam Morse. I am the director for Fellowship of the Wheel. We are a nonprofit that advocates for multi-use trails and maintenance of trails in Chittenden County. We maintain 10 spaces currently in Chittenden County. So I just wanted to bring a little bit of perspective from what we know of this community in Chittenden County, what the desires are, and an opportunity to share that briefly here with you, the review board and the general public. So of those 10 spaces, 3 of those are on private land and 7 of those are on municipal land. 2 of them are existing bike parks. One recently constructed in Westford at an elementary school.
Adam, are you going to be maintaining this park?
We are in discussion to help support maintenance at this park. And that was one of the points I was going to get to here, is that we do have some experience with building a bike park, constructing one in Westford and maintaining one in Essex Junction at the Maple Street Pool and Park in Essex Junction. So again, we have a lot of community feedback. In a recent survey, 80% of the 468 respondents supported more additional bike park spaces. And I think Renee really summarized like perfectly that many people don't have access to go to Essex, Westford, et cetera. Our mission is to create, recreational opportunities with a bike focus so that people can recreate on trails with their bikes. In Chittenden County and Burlington is one of, it's the largest population center in Vermont. It is the heart of Chittenden County. It is a space that we've tried to help find the right place for a bike trail. We've been involved with Arms Park, Ethan Allen Park, possibly exploring Star Farm to or even some sort of bike infrastructure at CP Smith all over the last 7 years. And that effort is driven by, our largest membership comes from Burlington. The majority of our feedback is that people want spaces that they can bike to from their homes. So being the largest population center, this is something we obviously strongly support. We've been involved with the selection of the contractor here. We've been involved as a, sort of an advocate to share what we know of this community and what it needs. We've put many of these other trail opportunities kind of on hold or by the wayside because they didn't quite feel like the right spot for Burlington. And this is one that has had a lot of work and effort put into ecological studies and, community needs to determine where is the best place. I would also just add as a former Burlington resident for 15 plus years, I was in the South End and had access to the bike path there. And I would consistently ride this bike path north and around town, linking with Spear Street. And there's this really spectacular network of paths around town that create, this access to this potential bike park. So it really does meet a lot of the goals of our mission to help create accessible spaces within Chittenden County. And as I said before, this is sort of the heart of Chittenden County and something that we strongly support. And getting back to the maintenance component, yes, it is sort of our hope that we continue to see maintenance and sort of an advisory capacity over this park, for Burlington Parks and Rec that may not have sort of the cycling and trail maintenance professionals. I think of a scenario where a tree falls down on one of these features. The Burlington Parks crew may be well equipped to clear the tree, but we have
Adam.
Yeah.
Way outside our review scope.
Okay.
You clearly support it. We hear you. We thank you. We're going to move on.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Sharon.
We had one other hand raised, it's lowered. If anyone online is looking to speak, raise your hand now. There's Mary again. Okay, so we have Mary.
All right,
Mary, you're up.
Mary. Mary's hand is down.
Well, or she's unmuted.
Mary's hand is up.
We can't hear you, Mary.
All right, once. Twice. 3 times. All right. Heard from everybody in the room. Appreciate the comments. You haven't heard from everyone in the room, ma'am. Go ahead.
I don't think you swear yourself.
Yes, you're right. She just came in.
Yes.
I wrote,
I know.
Yeah,
I do.
will you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter of consideration is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
absolutely.
Introduce yourself, tell us what you think.
So I'm Nancy Webb.
Also, if you could come up just for the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay. All right. So I'm Nancy Weber. I live in Lakewood Estates, a little beach crest, which is right next to the entrance to Leddy Park. I and many of the neighbors walk our dogs every day in Leddy Park. And the place where you're gonna put that bike path is right, the bike park is right in that area where we walk our dogs. And my worry is it's not gonna be safe or pleasant to walk there anymore. There's gonna be a lot of noise and a lot of activity, and it's not gonna be supervised. It's just gonna be kids in there going crazy on their bikes. I thought when you had it in the middle of the 2 roads, the entrance and the exit from the park, that made sense because it was away from the neighborhoods and it was kind of some little area. Now, somebody told me you changed from that because of some plants. And I think neighbors are probably more important than the plants, in my opinion. You can always dig the plants up and plant them themselves. So that's, I think it's gonna have a really bad impact on our neighborhood.
Okay.
That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Yep.
So with that,
Can I ask one more question?
you can ask one more question.
That eastern spur, is it really necessary?
Sorry, when you say the eastern spur, you're referring to the entrance off the existing bike pedestrian path running through the center of Leddy Park there, that section of Leddy Park rather?
Yes.
If we want to get people onto the top of the flow and jump trail, that's not from the road, so sort of as Max noted earlier, like that would be an entrance, a new entrance off the existing roadway, that's sort of the exit to the park. That's the best option. And I think Max noted the safety concerns with daylighting a path out onto that road. And, I think it's something that Knight and I considered, when we were looking at putting this all together is safety. And so it doesn't really make sense to have a new path daylighting out into the road like that. So yes, necessary.
I think the question is more, is the entrance from the bike path itself not sufficient enough? I guess. Like, could we have one entrance to this? And I do understand, there's a whole east side of the new North End that would be most likely to access this from that side. But I think the question is more, could we have one entrance to this and not 2?
I guess if I could chime in here, I would be concerned, it was brought up how, this informal path is going to be hard to close down because people want to go there. I would just be concerned that would then create a situation where people would want to create their own path into there. And then you might have an informal path that forms, that comes out into the intersection just to the north of the top of the flow line, or the top of this whole trail. And that would be actually the worst place for people to enter, because it's already an intersection for cars. So then you would have a third entrance there.
As you are expecting bikers to come out onto the road near the parking lot, right?
Yes, in one designated area where pedestrians and bikers would be entering and exiting. So sort of controlling the traffic in one spot, so that, and it's as far away from this intersection of cars. There's also cars leaving this parking area at that, sort of where, if you had an informal path form, I think that would be the most likely area for it to happen. I think there may actually be an informal path in there that, it's very informal and barely there at all, but we planned on covering that over as well. So.
I also want to caution the board that this is a 4413 review. We have an extremely limited scope of review. And I'm sure redesigning the applicant's project is outside the scope of that review. Like, with a very high degree of certainty that we have very constrained abilities. So if they propose a design that is the limit to what we can do, I just want to remind them. Good, yeah, good. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll deliberate on this tonight. Thank you all for your feedback. And that is the end of our agenda items tonight.